Thank you very much, Jamie. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So happy to be back in our 425 show, What's New in Microsoft Entra, this time for September month. So my name is Jorge Lopez. I'm a senior product manager in the Microsoft Security Customer Experience team, focusing on identity and access management. And with me, I also have Bailey, which is also a senior product manager. And we both are going to share some of the new stuff that we have in the last few months in Entra. So let's get this going. And I'm going to show you a little bit of an agenda. So what went generally available as well that we know as GA. So we're going to talk to you about our newest product, the Microsoft Entra Suite. We're also going to talk about Microsoft Entra Private Access, Microsoft Entra Internet Access, some of the improvements or new features that we released for the Microsoft Entra ID protection. There's new detections there. Some insider risk-based CA policies. We will dive into some of this face check with Microsoft Entra Verified ID. Microsoft Entra ID governance also has a few nice new features. So we definitely want to deep dive into each one of these with you. So thank you for joining and appreciate you watching this. So let's get into the first one, right? The Microsoft Entra. So what is Microsoft Entra? Microsoft Entra is designed to secure the access for any identity to any app or resource from anywhere. So it's our umbrella of covering multiple products as part of the family of Microsoft Entra. And it's focused to basically protect, as I said, like all identities from employees, customers, partners, and even digital workloads from any connection, which is within your corporate network or open over the internet, to all resources like modern SaaS applications or legacy on-premises servers and file shares. So imagine that. We'll talk about like how that looks like in private access. In fact, so this is how the Microsoft Entra product family looks like. So we have all of these different pillars from, establishing zero trust access controls with our Microsoft Entra ID, starting in P1. We have our secure access for your workforce with all of these features that we just mentioned as part of the Microsoft Entra suite. Secure access for customers and partners through Microsoft external Microsoft Entra External ID, as well as secure access in any cloud with some of our other features like Microsoft Entra Permissions Management and Microsoft Entra Workload Identity. So this is how the Microsoft Entra product family, we wanted to put together a little bit of the silos that we offer for the product family so you can understand how we cover these needs for every step of the way, starting with the foundational product like Microsoft Entra ID, formerly known as Azure ID, all the way to all of these other protections. And of course, we will have, we want to include into this family the Microsoft Copilot for security as well, which is something that will span across all of these different features. So what is the Microsoft Entra Suite? So it is that pillar that talks about the secure access for your workforce with Microsoft Entra Private Access to access those private resources from on-premises resources as well, legacy apps and so on. Microsoft Entra Internet Access that protects with, the internet traffic to M365 workloads, M365 applications, some other SaaS applications as well. The Microsoft Entra ID governance, so govern the user's lifecycle from the source of truth on a provisioning, how to safe provision those users, how to onboard all of those users, getting the proper entitlements, make sure that the lifecycle makes sense for every time they get a just-in-time access, policies on applications, auto assignment, birthright assignments, all of the multiple things that we have out there. Microsoft Entra ID, with identity protection, which is something that maybe a lot of you are familiar already, which is formerly known as Azure AD. We include also ID protection into this Microsoft Entra suite. And Microsoft Entra Verified ID Premium, which is our capabilities to verify that identity through a digital credential to make sure that when partners or even employees tries to get access to a specific resource, we can verify that through that digital credential in their authenticated app using DID, which is the centralized identity that help us basically cover all of these features. So to expand a little bit more, right, on the vision. because we want for everybody to see our vision on why including all of these different features in a bundle together. So this is kind of like a graph that explains it a little bit. So any worker, cloud-based, on-premises identities, groups and roles from any location, any platform, and any device. We will secure that access for all of those users to access all of these other data, like applications or resources that are hosted in the cloud or even on premises. So they all work together to help you protect these workforce identities and devices from everywhere and secure all of the data while accessing those applications. So all of that is what the suite brings together, which is the best of breed tools for identity governance, identity protection, and verified credentials, as I mentioned. So, and this is how we kind of like see the flow happening, right? So you can onboard users from HR systems. You can also onboard them securely using verified credentials as well. You can onboard guests into the directory and into the second phase, which is governed access, right? So this is what it looks like, those four major stages. So once you onboard these users in the environment, second, we need to govern their access, right? So make sure that every single user that is onboarded has the right access to the right resources at the right time. With governing access, we look for examples like automation, both in providing access as well as removing access for users that no longer need it through things like lifecycle workflows in Microsoft Entra ID governance. And also how to govern those other requests like self-service requests through access packages. So users can easily and quickly request that access through some approval workflows. Like if you need up to 3-stage approvals for somebody that requests access to specific application for a certain amount of time. The third piece is we need to secure their access based on any resource. Here we look at the using some of the adaptive risk-based policies, as well as providing all of those secure tunnels to any resource, right? So integrating the part of the threat intelligence and telemetry that we have for identity protection, the continuous risk assessment and automation, the zero trust adaptive policies through the tunnels that we can provide for internet resources through Microsoft Entra Internet Access and the private resources, including on-premises applications with the Microsoft Entra Private Access. So with this way and during all of these stages, we do have the ongoing auditing and reporting, which is very important as well, to make sure that there's this key component of reporting and keeping control of their environment. So all of these will be included or are included as part of the Microsoft Entra suite. So that's what went GA. Let's talk about one of these specific products that also went generally available in the last few months, which is Microsoft Entra Private Access. So with these features, we aim to secure all private apps and resources from users anywhere with an identity-centric zero trust network access approach that is built on the zero trust principles that removes all of the risk and operational complexity of all of those legacy VPNs, right? So boosting user productivity while connecting to all of these resources and eliminate all of those excessive apps and stop all of the lateral threat movements with automatic app discovery, easy onboarding of applications that will be using the private access, per access controls, granular app segmentation, and intelligent local access. So how does this looks like from an end user standpoint, right? So think about protecting all of those internal dashboards, internal sites that are not published over the internet for somebody that can access from anywhere in the device. Put conditional access controls on it. So if you're familiar with conditional access, you can have multiple conditions, trusted devices, the compliant network in this case, some of the things to control that access like MFA or multi-factor authentication. So how nice it is to have multi-factor authentication when users try to access a file share or an internal site that is not published per se over the internet. SSH, remote desktop, all of these different things that you can now control with private access through the Global Secure Access Client with conditional access to modernize all of these different things and prevent and avoid this legacy VPN configuration. So how to onboard it? Well, you can also have access packages in identity governance to basically provide that access to a file share, and then with private access, make sure that conditional access can be set up in front of these clients. So when the users try to access this file share, for instance, which is the small little video that you see right there, they will get prompted to use their modern credentials and potentially multi-factor authentication if that's what you require for this. So that's what Microsoft Entra Private Access offers. And that's, as mentioned, part of our features that went generally available in the last couple of months. So with that, we also have Microsoft Entra Internet Access that offers, SaaS and M365 applications and all of the other resources while protecting your organization against internet threats. So the tunnel that we have to access all of these different websites, malicious network traffic, unsafe or non-compliant content, Microsoft Entra Internet Access will unify these controls in a single policy and secure all of the gaps and minimize the risk of cyber threats. With this, we plan to simplify basically and modernize traditional network security to protect all of the users and applications with advanced capabilities like universal access controls or tenant restrictions as well. Make sure that your users are not connecting to other tenants if they don't need to, token protection, web content filtering, cloud firewall, threat protection, TLS inspections, plus best-in-class secure and optimized access for M365 only. So see it as a way to protect all of these different web traffic content into the extension with conditional access to your network. So same concept, but private access. If you require a specific control before your users will access a specific sites or M365 applications, you can then configure this piece with Microsoft Entra Access. One of the use cases that we are talking to customers about. So think about maybe you want to block all internet traffic to malicious sites, right? Let's say hacking tool sites or social media, if it's not needed, stuff like that. But there's a specific business reason on why a user can get a profile on the network profile to maybe access those for an hour. Then you can integrate what we call the Microsoft Entra ID governance to request an access package that will make the user part of a group that then will assign that traffic profile to the user to access that specific site. And because Entra ID governance will control that for 1 hour, we'll remove the users from that group membership, remove that traffic profile, and then just basically remove the access to those sites when it's no longer needed. So I'm just mentioning Entra ID governance again because I want you to see all the capabilities and how we're bundling and how for us makes sense to bundle private access, internet access, conditional access policies with ID protection and Entra ID governance with verified credentials as well into the Entra suite. So those are the things that we are offering as part of the Entra suite. So those two went generally available, Microsoft Entra Identity Protection. It's been out there for quite some time. Entra ID governance also went GA before. So there's a lot of things that we're working on to make sure that we cover all of these phases and pillars that I mentioned before. And okay, perfect. So I'm going to pause here because that's it for the Entra suite. And before I move on to some of the other controls or some of the things that went GA, I'm going to read some of the questions. So can private access allows RDP SSH with passwordless authentication with conditional access? So that is a great question. So I'm not sure about passwordless, to be honest, where we can definitely follow up on that question. But definitely the conditional access policy is one of the benefits of providing these private access controls, right? So having those conditions in place for those users. So thank you for your question. Looks like that's something that came in right now. So let's now switch gears a little bit to what else went GA in the last couple of months before I pass it on to my colleague Bailey. So Microsoft Entra ID Protection, attacker in the middle detection. So as you know, Microsoft Entra Identity Protection has a lot of different detections. We keep working on new detections every month. So this attacker in the middle detection is a high precision detection that triggers when an account has been compromised by an adversary and was intercepted some user credentials, right? Including tokens, which is the most important thing. That type of attack that basically puts a proxy in the middle or attacker in the middle to capture those tokens and replay those tokens. We have included this attacking in the middle detection for Microsoft Entra ID protection. So a new detection that is out there that went GA. And we work with the Microsoft Security Research team to leverage all of these detections with or other features like Microsoft 365 Defender to capture all of these risks and raises the user to high risk, making sure that when you have policies or conditional access policies based on Entra ID protection, that maybe you want to block the user or have the user to basically lose access to those applications or just revoke the token or whatnot when we detect that a specific attack in the middle detection. So, and I think Bailey, I want to pass it over to you because Bailey is going to talk to you about some of the other features that went GA, and she's also going to share a few things around our public previews. So thank you very much for joining. Bailey, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jorge. Let me grab my video to come on up here. It's great to finally be back on the 425 show. I know that previously Grace Picking would do these with Jorge in terms of the what's new in Entra. So we're excited to bring it back since it was a popular request. On that note as well, if you do have an idea for a show or something that you would like to see us talk about, please let us know. We're very much in listening mode. This is actually the second time that we've done a 425 show since its revival. So especially with any of these new items that have gone GA or that have gone public preview as well. If there's something you would like a technical deep dive on, please let us know and we'll see if we can bring the team in to have that conversation. And also, as Jorge answered a question in the chat, if you do have questions throughout this, please feel free to pop them in. So that way we can chat with y'all about them during the rest of our time together today. So with that, I do want to mention some insider risk-based conditional access policy enhancements that have recently come out, similar to the feature that Jorge was just showing, where we had a great partnership with Defender on identity protection with attacker in the middle scenarios. This leverages a lot of Purview's adaptive protection capabilities, which I think is an exciting way that we've been really integrating some cross-product strategies when we think about how customers are accessing and managing their security capabilities. So within identity protection, you're now able to leverage the condition for insider risk instead of purely user risk. So if Purview flagged the user as doing something that might have a potentially elevated, moderate, or minor flag of being insider risk, we're able to take some real-time responses to that and configure those identity protection policies accordingly. Another feature that we recently came out with is the face check with verified ID. So this is near and dear to my heart because it was the very first team that I worked on when I was at Microsoft almost 6 years ago. So it's exciting to see this come together. But what we've recently come out with in GA is the ability to do face check, which is where we're able to see, in addition to a verified ID, that this is a real person and that this is the person who they say they are when we are checking a selfie. So think about it when you're showing your ID in order to purchase something at the grocery store. We are also able to attach a photo to a verified ID that would be on the user's device and then cross-check that with a selfie. And with that selfie, we're also doing a liveness check. So we know that we're not just holding up a piece of paper with a picture of that user. And we're able to see that this is the user that they say they are and do that facial matching. So it's another great way to further reduce risk, especially when we're looking at more and more customers being onboarding their employees remotely, and also help desk scenarios that are happening more and more remotely where we need to prove that this is a real person. So another great tool in your arsenal to continue to reduce risk and take a defense in-depth approach. I do see a question about the licensing requirements for insider risk policy, whether it's P2 or Entra Suite. And for that, since Jorge and myself are on the engineering side of the house, we don't typically, we aren't on the sales side. So I would recommend reach out to your licensing professional. But off the top of my head, I believe that it is a P2 offering, but please check with your sales professional since they would have the up-to-date knowledge on that. And I don't want to lie to you on what that is. But great question though, and please keep them coming if there is anything else that y'all would like to know more about. In terms of some new offerings on the governance side, which is something that is we've been making a lot of significant progress on and has been exciting to see these changes, especially when we talk through lifecycle workflows of those joiner, mover, leaver scenarios of an employee being onboarded or somebody changing their role. We have a new trigger in lifecycle workflow where we're able to see the job profile change. And that is fantastic for creating custom workflows if I am needing to change group membership and have my user added to various groups. So if you think about that internal movement, it's another great trigger that's further automating this and alleviating some of that effort from the teams that would be managing it more closely. We also have capabilities with some new tasks that were added where we can notify users manager about a move. So if you have a new employee coming in or new licenses that are going to be added to that employee or moved to that employee accordingly, we're able to do that with some fancy automation skills. So definitely go and check that out if that's applicable to your organization. Another Entra ID governance offering that we've come out with has been, again, within lifecycle workflows, but this is custom security attribute scoping. So if you are a customer that leverages custom security attributes, you're able to now do some of those joiner, mover, leader automations within lifecycle workflows regarding it. So you could further define the scope of those workflows and give you some more granular control, especially if you are someone who is using those custom security attributes for your internal use cases. And the last Microsoft Entra ID governance capability that we've come out with that's gone GA has been the ability to enable, disable, and delete synchronized accounts from lifecycle workflows. So a lot of great automation capabilities. And this is fantastic if you are using Active Directory domain services, where I'm able to go and delete that account also on premises and sync it up to Microsoft Entra. So very helpful as well for that employee offboarding scenario where you're able to delete that user account. So super helpful for that for those folks who are on-prem as well. And so I do want to pause there before we go into public previews. Let me see. I do see a question from Jordan. I can link to you the docs as well on the liveness check with a video of a person. And so what it would be using is the camera on the device. And so I'll pop a link to that in the chat as we wrap things up, or if somebody else, on the team is able to grab that doc with the liveness check capabilities, that can walk you through how that works under the hood. Off the top of my head, it leverages the Azure AI services, visual services where they're able to see that individual. So if you've ever played around with that in terms of some of our AI capabilities, it will show the liveness check, just proving that it's 3D and not a 2D image. So we'll send that over so you can go dive into those docs a little bit more deeply. And if you do have any other questions, feel free to follow up with Jorge and myself on the channels for the 425 show. So that way we can, talk you through this a little bit more closely. I think it would also be great as a future episode of the 425 show for us to give a technical deep dive on verified ID as well as face check and talk through that. So if that is something y'all would be curious about or would be wanting to see, please let us know, and we're happy to work with the team to get that scheduled. Now, I do want to go and transition into some of our new public preview capabilities. So for those of y'all who know, when we do release new features, we first start out in public preview before moving to GA. And so it's part of our feature release cycle in terms of coming out with new features to also make sure that we are appropriately building out what customers are expecting and moving forward in the direction of what y'all are wanting. So I have 4 that I want to touch on here. First one being some new PowerShell capabilities, PH2 provisioning with APIs, some new UX enhancements with users being able to pick to enhance their certificate picking experience, which can be quite cumbersome for users that are not familiar with that, as well as external ID leveraging SMS as an MFA method. So I'll talk into those more deeply in a moment. First of all, for the Microsoft Entra PowerShell module, if y'all are familiar with the Azure AD PowerShell module, which was deprecated, this is going to be helpful for accelerating that migration off of Azure AD PowerShell. So this new module is built on top of Microsoft Graph PowerShell, And it has a lot of great capabilities. And one of my favorite things about how we've gone about creating this is that it's open source. And so anybody can contribute, build out their scenarios and examples. And so we're looking forward to some more progress that's going to be made there. And so I highly encourage y'all to check it out, especially if you are in the process of migrating off of Azure AD PowerShell. The next public preview capability that I wanted to highlight was PH2 provisioning with APIs. So if you as an organization are now moving toward passwordless, you're wanting to get a lot of your employees on passkeys, and you're wanting to pre-provision those and do that via API, especially if you are a large organization, this is the way you would do that. So it's exciting that it's in public preview. And so these APIs are fantastic for simplifying that onboarding experience, especially if you are a large org and you needed to manage a lot of users for onboarding and make that day one experience easier for the end user because they're pre-provisioned, and for you as the IT admin because you don't have to do that manually or do that within the UX. So exciting that it is now available via API. The next one, which I think is very helpful, especially for when users are prompted to pick a certificate, especially if you've never seen this before, this might be quite daunting to an end user and confusing and prompt some help desk calls. So in order to further alleviate that, what we do is that we have a suggested certificate. So it'll hint to the certificate that the user should select, and it's going to show only certificates that are issued by your tenant. So that way it just makes it a little bit easier. The user is more likely to pick the correct one. So that way they don't have to go through the process of figuring out, oh my goodness, what is this? And calling help desk. So hopefully that alleviates some of the issues that some customers have run into with their end users getting confused by their certificate picker experience, and make that a little bit easier on folks. The last item that recently went into public preview is on the Microsoft Entra external ID side, and this is where we can do SMS as an MFA method. So this is something that a lot of folks have been looking for a while, especially with external ID since it wasn't previously available. So now we can launch that for those users. And we also have built-in telecom protection to help reduce the risk of any sort of bad actor interference there. So really exciting stuff on that front in terms of Microsoft Entra external IDs. And with that, I know that we've wrapped up a little bit ahead of schedule, but we do want to emphasize how excited we are for these new 425 show episodes, especially since our intention is to provide deeper technical content. Previously, when we did the 425 shows, these episodes with what's new were some of our most popular. So if they still are, we're happy to continue doing them and actually, roll them out to be a more broader what's new within Microsoft security is what we're thinking. If that's something that y'all would want in terms of a what's new in Microsoft security, let us know. If you are like, I do not want these what's news, I am really looking for the deep technical content, webinar walkthroughs with the feature teams, let us know as well. We're happy to explore that further. We're very much in listening mode, trying to figure out what our audience is looking for from us. So part of that is through your engagement and feedback. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we really appreciate y'all coming to chat with us on the show.
All right, if there's no more questions, I want to go ahead and thank Bailey and Jorge for your presentation on today's topic. Thank you for everyone for joining us today, and you have a great day. Goodbye.